All right. Well, metabolizing intense emotions. Okay, so I'm going to start with a new poem that, in a way, spent my whole life trying to write this poem, and certainly the last month, and came
Now,
together.
stop for just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I have two options. It can go to the cloud or it can go somewhere else. You've only got one option, so go ahead, you're good.
All right.
Sorry.
No problem. Technology. We'll try to simplify that. Okay, so how to work with skillfully, how to metabolize the energy of intense emotions. We're sort of focusing in on one part of life in the context of the whole life. Okay, so I'm going to read a poem for you a couple of times, and then we'll spring off of it to actually get a concrete practice that will help us out to do this thing. Because by instinct, we basically avoid intense emotions. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how we break that down. But I mean, that's our childhood operating system. We have three operating systems built in. We're sort of like a three-stage rocket. We have a childhood operating system that runs on instinct. We have that's a survival operating system. That's why it's the first to be accessed. And then we have a strategic operating system that helps us, manage time and space more effectively. Words, come after a certain time. Language, reason, beautiful. It's why we're connected here. It's a miracle, really. So that's the strategic operating system. So we got instinct, we got intellect, and then the third operating system and they go in that kind of, you can't skip a section. A third is the sacred operating system, which involves the deepest operating system, the operating system that is known as the heart. And it includes instinct, it includes intellect, but it actually sees life as a holistic kind of vision. It sees everything. And I'm going to use words now. The teachings come down in words because words really are the voice of the heart. So this is a poem that comes out of the heart, and open your heart to it, and then we'll open it up further. And this poem will be put out on Monday so if you want a copy of the poem to look at it further. It goes like this. Yeah. Starts off with a Tibetan saying. Tibetans are some of the great masters of transformation, transforming reality, transforming suffering into happiness. The Tibetans say recognition and liberation is simultaneous. So first of all, you have to recognize that every created thing arises, displays for a while, and then dissolves. You've seen time-lapse photos of a bean plant sprouting, growing to fullness, and then withering. Well, it's not just beans. It's empires, civilizations, corporations, economies, emotions, which we're dealing with today. Every moment that ever was, is, or will be, and each and every one of us every created thing arises, displays for a while, and then dissolves back into great mystery. Liberation comes as soon as you recognize that every experience arises, displays for a time, and dissolves just like a rainbow. Yet, experience is actually not just what happens to us. More importantly, experience is how we participate, how we relate to what happens to us. If we welcome each arising moment with a heartfelt sense of unconditional kindness, immediacy, sensation, and surprise, we will have lived our way into the pure land of the Buddha, into the kingdom of Jesus, and into the guest house of Rumi. As Teilhard de Chardin predicted, someday, after we have mastered the winds, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love. That's the title of this poem, Harnessing the Energies of Love. I'll read it again to let it sink in a little bit, and then we'll sort of zero in on a couple of places. I have a little tagline under the title. The quote, it's the last line of the Divine Comedy, which was the epic of the Middle Ages. Dante takes us through hell, purgatory, to heaven, home, in 1,000 lines of Italian poetry. But the last line, translated to English, is you end up with the love that moves the sun and the other stars. He's talking about love as an energy that creates everything, that moves everything. It's not an emotion. Well, not when we're talking about the kind of love of harnessing the energy of love. There's an energy there. When you fall in love, you feel that. When you love a child, you feel that. When you love a place or a river or a person or a good meal, you start to feel that energy. So this is, again, and we'll you may have had a hard time seeing the practice there. Well, we'll sort of pull it out for us to look at. The Tibetans say recognition and liberation are simultaneous. It's another way of saying I'm reading a book by a Buddhist kind of psychologist who trained with Trungpa, Chogyam Trungpa, great Tibetan teacher. And the title of the book is Already Free. We're already free. Once we can recognize what's going on, recognition and liberation and freedom are simultaneous. What a concept that we actually are already free. As long as we can, it's like the great Christian hymn, I was blind, but now I see. So recognition and liberation are simultaneous. So first of all, you have to recognize what's going on here. You have to recognize that every created thing arises for a time, displays for a while, and then dissolves. You've seen time-lapse photos of a bean sprouting and growing to fullness and then withering. Well, it's not just beans. It's empires, civilizations, corporations, economies. This economy we have, this civilization we have, hasn't always been this way. It's not going to last forever. That's a good thought to remember when you're somebody has the boot on your neck. Is in parts of the world, nothing lasts forever. When you're down and hurting, that really helps. Yeah. Each and every one of us, it includes that. Every created thing arises, displays for a while, and then dissolves back into the great mystery. The same way a wave, it could be tidal wave, it could be a tsunami. It will go back into the ocean. So everything arises, peaks, and then recedes. If you can recognize that, there's a kind of freedom in that. Liberation. Liberation comes as soon as you can recognize this, that all of this is like a rainbow. We'll get back to that. Experience is actually not what happens to us. Let that sink in. Experience is not just what happens to us. It's more importantly, experience of how we relate to what happens to us. That in itself is worth a poem in itself, to realize that experience is not what we thought, not just things happening in this universe. It's more importantly how we relate to them. We'll double back on that line. Now here comes the practice. I'm going to zero in on this particular couplet. If we welcome each arising moment with a heartfelt sense of unconditional kindness, immediacy, sensation, and surprise, we will have lived our way into the pure land of the Buddha, into the kingdom that Jesus is talking about, and into the guest house that Rumi described. Teilhard de Chardin once predicted that someday, after we've mastered the winds, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love. It's coming. And until we harness the energies of love, well, we have much more suffering than happiness. Okay. So let's zero in on a couple of things here. First of all, if you accept the reality, if you can see the reality that no created thing lasts, that everything has a time span, it arises, displays, and then recedes. If you can actually understand that includes us as human beings, okay, then that's it could be frightening at first. It's certainly frightening to the childhood ego part of ourselves, the childhood operating system, because that's all about survival. But when you think of a wave cresting and making all of its, surfers idolize waves. They're looking for the big wave, etc. So waves, you can watch waves all day at the beach and be entertained because there's not two that are the same. It's brilliant in a way, just the same way I look out the window now, I see the garden and a bunch of flowers, all roses, but they're not two the same. Everything has a uniqueness to it. We do too, if we could actually go through the stages to really get to fullness. Yeah. You could be, there's a switchover that happens with you as you start to see things, as you start to access something beyond the childhood operating systems that are still part of us and sometimes very strong, where we're afraid of not surviving, which is brilliant for a young infant or a child, because that fear, that gives you the upper level of the Enneagram. There's a deeper level, of course, and if all you get is the surface, the superficial kind of childhood operating system of it, survival and security, affection and esteem, power and control, if that's all if that's all life's about, you always be sort of afraid. There is, Merton writes about Ishi. Ishi was the last native Aboriginal American that was in California that we know of, and he was so good at hiding that his whole tribe was wiped out, but Ishi was left in California, and he was a brilliant hider. And there's a part of us that hiding has a survival value, of course. especially if there's big forces trying to wipe you out. So there's nothing wrong with that. But he was hiding, and he was a really good hider. He's almost like an invisible person. And so California's starting to build up. And then he saw from his hiding place, he was up high so he could look at everything. He saw a train for the first time. He saw a locomotive and a train, and it's flipped him out. He called it a long snake, at first. But then and then it would stop and people get into the belly of the snake and they come out of the he was intrigued by this thing. And so one day he just walked into town, like naked almost. There's an Indian who just walks into town, and everybody was, marvelous. Nobody even spoke his language, really. So it took a while for them to figure out, who is this guy? Where's he coming from? And why is he coming from? And but they found somebody who could actually still knew that language and could translate for him. And they said, well, why did you come out of hiding? Why did you walk into town? And he said something very interesting. Merton wrote an essay about this. Merton wrote an essay about everything that was important. And the answer he gave about why he walked into town, he said, well, talked about the metal snake, but he said, at some point I was more curious than afraid. Boy, when you get to that point, you're rolling in the spiritual journey. At some point when you're more curious than afraid, and it's a tipping of the balance. There's still fear. We still have that childhood operating system. You wouldn't want to lose fear, because some things are there. You don't, if you're rubbed out, you can't survive in a way and thrive and develop. This is about evolution. Species get wiped out every day, but then some keep going, and that's what pushes the whole thing. There's this energy of love that's trying to keep things going here. Yeah, but to get that line of Ishi, that that can keep you going. At some point, I was more curious than afraid. Ted Lasso, if you see Ted Lasso, this comedy on Apple TV that's winning so many awards, he makes up a quote by Walt Whitman. Ted does. Actually, Whitman never said it, but it's a TV program. But he said, you should be more curious than judgmental. He was playing off that. What if people were more curious than judgmental? But really, where judgment comes from, fear. Ishi said it. At some point, I became more curious than afraid, and I walked into it. Okay. So how do you handle intense emotions now? Well, one thing is you wouldn't be here if you weren't curious about it. Some people will probably not even want to come to this. I sent this out to a few people, but you're obviously more curious than afraid to even consider the deal. So I'm going to put up a screensaver for a moment. I can manipulate this thing, because people who are watching this on tape haven't seen it. And this icons are they're windows into deeper reality. Most of you can remember when this event happened. And again, this experience of 9/11, where the true World Trade Center towers were flown into. You see the planes out there getting ready to fly into them. And that was an experience, an event. But what this icon shows is it's a picture of Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's called our Mother of Sorrows. She knows how to handle Mary, at least in terms of the scriptures that we have. Mary had the ability to deal with everything, including watching her son be crucified and killed. And she was right there. She was one of the ones. There's 3 Marys at the foot of the cross, by the way. There might have been one stray guy there, but there's at least these three that always show up: Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother, and Mary the wife of Cleopas. So these three women are there. Interesting, but Mary always had the ability to hold the sorrow, as I think the other two probably did too. But she's an icon of that, mother of sorrows. How do you hold this? Now, when you look at this icon, some things pop out. By the way, the Cyrillic writing up in the corners is on the right side is New York, and on the left side is Russian, which is a really interesting thing now, given what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. It's the Russian letters for peace. So you got peace in New York in the midst of this, well, I don't know, this devastation. Okay. Now, I want to take a look at Mary for a minute and look at her hands, first of all. Yeah. How her hands are figured there, how she's holding the sorrow. And I would contend, we'll come back to this in our imagination, but take a good look to it, because I want to, we'll come off of this icon. But when you look at her, she at first glance, she could look like detached from all this. She's not looking at the planes, and she's not looking at the disaster. She's holding it. But I would say that, first of all, this is not detachment. Detachment comes up in Buddhism a lot, and detachment can mean, I'm out of here, or you could ignore something, or you can put your head in the sand, or you could whatever. I'd say she's participating in this event. It's a participatory. And again, that's what experience is. It's not something that happens to you. This did happen. A couple planes flew into the thing. It happened. But then experience is really how you participate with that. Okay. Is your relationship to it, how you relate to the event. That the experience is a participatory phenomenon. That's why I say it's this arising, displaying and dissolving ADD. This is not a thing. It's a participatory event. It's like a rainbow. When you look at a rainbow in the sky, well, it obviously exists, and it's beautiful. I once saw a completely circular one of it in Maui when I was there, when my son got married. We were near the rainforest part of Maui, and you could see it. And it's beautiful. It just, you can't say it doesn't exist. But on another level, it's an entirely relational phenomenon. There is the sun, there is the rain droplets, and then there's the observer. When you see the rainbow, it's the relationship of those three things. You remove one of them, rainbow doesn't exist. And Descartes actually, was a geometer and whatever, he actually measured the angle at which the rainbow always appears, something like 62 degrees, above the horizon or whatever. But yeah, so there's all these elements. But so does the rainbow exist? Well, obviously it does on one level, but what is that existence? It's not solid, it's not a thing. Just like no event is a thing, just like no person is a thing. If you go into the human body and whatever, there's so many systems working that even allow me to use words. If you have brain damage or something, there are no words, perhaps, you see. So this is reality. And so when an emotion arises, it's not a thing. Anger is not a thing. Rage, which we were talking about last Sunday, the rage at the potential legislation change of legislation from the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, et cetera. The rage people were feeling. Well, it was an event. going on here. It was a participatory event. And how do we deal with that? So now let's just really try to get this 4-step kind of practice. It takes this is how you can relate to anything, and especially the real. There's all kinds of emotion, just like there's all kinds of weather. But we're practicing in you make hay while the sun rises, while the sun shines, according to that's a farmer aphorism. In other words, practice all the time so that when the hurricanes roll in, you'll know what to do. When the tornadoes roll in, you'll know what to do. Practice with these little things. So there's all kinds of emotions, but we're talking about intense emotions today. And the first thing is to cultivate an attitude of unconditional kindness. That's what Rumi was talking about in the guest house. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if there's a crowd of sorrows that violently strip your house empty of all of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. Maybe they're to show you some new delight. So this attitude of unconditional kindness to meet whatever arises, that you got to cultivate that. Thich Nhat Hanh says, he's a great light in terms of walking emotions. He says, you will not be overwhelmed by an emotion if you know how to smile at it. Smiling practice. And so what is really kindness? Let's break kindness down. Kindness is a unconditional non-aggression pact you have with life. Now think about that for a minute. Just write that down if you can, that to assume this attitude, assume this be attitude, which is a nice word, to be this kind of attitude of having a total non-aggression pact with life, not just emotion. Emotion is just one, it's kind of energy of life, but to just be in this world, in this universe, in this body, in this, with everything going on, and to sort of have an attitude of non-aggression towards it. I think that's really what Jesus' his approach was. The line of scripture that says, resist not evil. I think that's, you look into it, the translation is the problem. Jesus had a non-aggression pact with everybody, even what happened to him. And so let's look at the 3 types of aggression that we all have built into us from the childhood operating system. So it's important to recognition and liberation are simultaneous. So we need to recognize the way we are aggressive. We are aggressors to life itself, to every moment. First of all, there's external aggression, which is what we sort of think aggression is. It's aggression towards others. And there are temperaments of people. Some people are temperamentally lead with that. They are aggressive. These are the people sort of scare you in life. But there's 2 other types of aggression. There's internal aggression, where it's not about attacking others. It's not about blaming others like external aggression. It's about attacking yourself. It's internal. And you blame yourself, self-blame. You take that aggression inward and it gets twisty. That's more my style. Everybody does all 3 of these kinds of things, but there's a certain style you lead with. The Enneagram will tip you off to that. Now, the 3rd style of aggression is the unbeatable style of aggression, really. It's passive aggression. Any 9 on the Enneagram, you lead this way, okay? And you don't put it towards others, and you, at least on the surface, don't put it towards yourself. Passive aggression comes from, you just ignore the whole situation. You ignore the anger that's coming up. It's what the Buddhists call ignorance. It just means, I'm out of here. I space out, I trip out. A lot of times the symptom of that, uh, the symptom that shows up is a kind of dullness of life. It's a kind of ennui, as the French say. It's just gray. Okay. And of course, we do all of these things, and if the Enneagram will help you understand what your lead form, but they're all aggression. Passive aggression is hard to beat because it doesn't look like aggression, you see. So those are the three kinds of aggression. And so first of all, you got to learn your own way that you fight reality, that you fight the moment. And why do we do this? Well, again, when we're infants coming out of the womb, it's a brilliant operating system because there's certain things you just can't experience. It'll just like blowing out the light bulb, so we have like a fuse in our system that can just resist resist these things. Intense emotions would be one of them, you see. And so we have a resistance thing that's optimum for survival if you're an infant, or as you grow up as a child. Okay, and that's not good or bad. It's just brilliant. And how brilliant? Well, here we are. We all made it through. But we couldn't even turn over. And there were things that happened in our family when we were little kids and sort of powerless that you couldn't take in. You couldn't take in your, drunken father beating your mother up in front of you at age 2. I mean, I work with people who have all these kinds of experience. Maybe it's your mother, holding you and she frowns at you. Who knows, the level of it in terms of sensitivity, but any kind of intense thing, we actually avoid it. We can avoid it this way. We can avoid it by running away from it. Okay. It's avoidance. And so we have certain things in our life that it's in our childhood program that we don't go there. We don't go there. I don't do anger, etc. The strong emotions. Some people don't do sorrow. If you're a 7 on the Enneagram, that's the challenge, to actually feel the sorrow. Oh, I really need to take Our Lady off here. Yeah. So that's kindness. Now, immediacy, the second part is the present moment. Again, Thich Nhat Hanh's one of the masters of this practice of the presence of God. Old Christian text from the, I think, 14th century. Same thing that as Thich Nhat Hanh says, we have arrived. We are home in the here, in the now. Think about that for a minute. As he so rightly says, you can only live in the present moment. When you're in the past, you're in the zombiehood, and when you're trying to figure out the future before it happens, it's like it's equivalent of being a zombie. You sort of look like a human being, but you're really not living. The only place you can live is now. You're only alive. So that's the second thing. Once you decide to meet whatever arises with kindness, then you decide that it's a moment by moment enterprise. That's why Thich Nhat Hanh's practice of mindfulness. I mean, you can have a serious sitting practice. I mean, I hope you do, to go deep into the silence, but you have to be on your toes 24/7. That's really what mindfulness is about. That you're not, you got this non-aggression packed with the present moment. It's not just when big things come. Okay. So it's a question of living in the now. And, I'm 72, and how much of these 72 years have I actually been living in the present moment? I mean, it would be startling to see a readout of it moment by moment. 5 years, The rest of the time, regretting the past, trying to undo the past. The rest of the time, trying to figure out what's coming around the bend so I can control it. How much time has actually been in the present moment being alive? That's a good question. Yeah. It's sort of to be curious about these things, more curious than afraid, you see. And then the third thing, so kindness, immediacy, and then sensation. Um, you have an opportunity to be a sensational person, especially when emotion arises, because emotion is thought that's rebounding in the bottom. And you're gripping your hands when you're angry. Your face is flushed when you're shamed. We have this whole world of sensation in our bodies, and the idea of to bring this on as a practice is to go into the body when especially I look out the window here sometimes because I'm surrounded by 18,000 acres of trees, these trees up there. And when I see the trees, when the tops of the trees are going like this, something big's going on. And that's like what we're talking about with intense emotion. Okay. Something big is rolling in, or it might roll in real fast. And all of a sudden, it's shaking you up. What do? Well, you don't stay in the treetops. You go down into the body. If you can, if you have in your memory the icon of our Mother of Sorrows, that one hand is was right under her belly, and the other one is right above the heart. You're going into your core. If a tree is going to survive, it's the core and especially the roots, you see, that can withstand this storm. And so once you realize, okay, I'm going to smile at whatever's happening, I'm going to not be aggressive about it, and then you're all right. What brings you into the now is really the breath. Okay. And then the breath can lead you into the world of sensation, the core of the body. Okay. And root yourself there. Take that on to master of that. Buddhism especially does that. Jesus does that too. That is the Holy Spirit, the holy breath, taking yourself into a more stable place. Get out of the treetops, get out of your mind when this stuff rolls in, because the mind's just going to start its avoidance. The mind will say, oh no, you're not coming in here. Not into my guest house. Well, so you accept it, non-aggression pact, breathe, pulls you into the now, and actually move your attention down. You could call it to the hara, as they taught, to the pit of your stomach. You can do that. You can practice this. That's what we practice when we're going to sit, at 10:15 today, or at a quarter after the hour after we get done with this talk. We're going to be sitting again, and we can practice letting ourselves go down more to the core, to the center, as we call it, and just hanging out there. We're practicing. Now your life might be great. You got a lot of people around you, and we're all practicing together. But we do that so that in the moment, we can know not to stay up in the treetops, you see, when the storm is running through. That's not, your mind is, your left brain is not the place to deal with intense emotions. It's not fit for it. Bring yourself down into the solidity of the body. And then the final thing is surprise. You're more curious than afraid. And so that leads you to a sense of, it's another beatitude, that you're willing to be curious and you're willing to be surprised of, well, where will this lead? Where will this lead? I was writing to somebody this week, and I talked, when Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom, you really you can understand that the kingdom is surprise. David Stendoras, Brother David Stendoras, once said he'd worn out every word possible that would contain God. He'd worn them all out. The Father worn out real quick, and even the mother and all this stuff. The only word that actually was still standing when he tried all his words for the great mystery was surprise. And surprise fits with mystery if you think about it. And so we're sort of going from, the sense of trying to always figure things out to the sense of being so curious that you're willing to be surprised, that the kingdom of heaven really is a surprise. If you see that the Mary Magdalene movie, I hope you will, and see it again, when you actually get to the scene, the resurrection scene, there's no words, but it's a big surprise. Yeah. Resurrection will be a big surprise. And so every time, every moment is a potential resurrection as you breathe in, as you breathe out. So why wait for later? Why not start living in the kingdom of surprise now? Because I'm telling you, in a few minutes, we're going to take some time out so you could relax or do some writing in a couple of minutes of what's resonating with this whole talk. But when we come back and hit the bell, we're doing a total drop into the kingdom of surprise, because you never know. And I've been doing this for half a century. I never know what's going to pop up. And if you change your attitude about that, and believe me, it took decades for me, because I'm a control freak by design. I want to know. I should know. It's only safe to know what's coming. Think of Ishi again. Be more curious than afraid when you sit. Again, that picture where the woman is the mother of sorrows is right in the middle of the mess. She's not actually smiling, but she's there. She's right there. I think a Mona Lisa smile would have probably been good, but that wasn't the icon maker. But that's that smile on Mona Lisa's face. I mean, when Da Vinci did that artist, that part of Italy was a total mess. Everybody was like assassinating each other and poisoning each other. I mean, it was as crazy as our time is now. But she has this posture. She has this posture and this smile. She is not fighting any of it, you see. But it's curious. That's why everybody's been curious about this picture for centuries. That smile. Yeah. One last thing about the kingdom of surprise. It's not a place of no suffering. There's a couple that just got killed in the Bahamas, and they don't know what. It was at a sandals resort, and the whoever was left in the family said, well, they know that they're in heaven now and whatever. And I don't know. I don't think that the kingdom of God or the kingdom of surprise is a place of no suffering. I think it is a place where if you're at that point where you can, whatever comes up, you can transform the suffering into happiness. Because I mean, the last thing I'll show you is this coin. This coin has two sides. You can't it's one coin. So you can't really take the tails part to San Francisco, and you can't take the head part to New York. You can't do that. The coin wouldn't exist. You can't do that. So this could be life, and life. The coin itself is life, and it's inextricably suffering and happiness are inextricably bound. You can't separate them. You can't take the heads to Alaska and the tails to Miami Beach. You can't do it. So why do we keep trying to find a world without suffering? rather than saying, no, we have to learn how to transform it. It would be the place where people know how to do this. They've practiced it. And then that becomes a little bit of the kingdom on earth when you meet a person, like the teachers I've had who have taken their time to teach. All right, this is how you do it. Jesus just didn't say he was the Son of God ever. He said, I'm the way. I mean, that's why the first noble truth is about suffering in the Buddhist thing. And then Jesus got this picture of this guy suffering there. He said, I'm the way to do this. It wasn't a sacrifice. He didn't do it to get rid of our sins. All that kind of stuff blurs the picture. But they both these two great men, Buddha and Jesus, they both said you gotta understand this relationship to suffering. These, especially these intense. I mean, people kill themselves every day, especially young people, in all the countries, because they don't know how to. They're suffering. They're suffering, and they were never taught. Um, you can't see what you were never told to pay attention to. That's another phenomenological law. We talked about how you see is what you see, but you can't see what you were never told to pay attention to. And that's what the teachers do, you see. So I think that's enough. And so take some time to resonate on the page with this if you like, and then we'll be back at about 1/4 after. Okay, thanks.